This is a glass of hazy craft beer. It is alive, breathing, and 11,000 years old. 6 epochs, 6 transformations across 11 millennia, but the same 3 ingredients: grain, yeast, and water. We begin at the very first accident. 9,000 years before the Common Era, in the caves of China. A nomadic camp. Wild rice and honey left in a clay vessel. Nature did the rest.
9,000 years before the Common Era. The settlement of Jiahu in modern-day China. A nomadic camp at night. Wild rice and honey were left in rough clay vessels. The fire burned low. Nature began its silent work. There was no recipe. There was no knowledge of microbes, only the warmth of the fire and the passage of time. It was not a deliberate invention. It was a simple accident, a forgotten vessel left in the dark. Weathered hands crush wild rice and honey in a rough clay bowl. The mixture ferments, changing from food to something new. Tiny bubbles rise to the surface. Wild yeast consumes the sugars, creating alcohol. The first beer is born in the dark. Someone tastes the changed liquid. It is different. It warms the body and alters the mind. They notice. They remember. It was not just an accident anymore. They understood what happened. They would do it again, on purpose, forever. 5,000 years before the Common Era. Sumer, the world's first beer recipe, baked into clay forever. Inside the great city of brewing was no longer an accident. It was a sacred craft, documented in stone. The hymn to Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. Every step recorded, so the knowledge would survive the ages. It was not just a formula. It was a prayer to the gods, ensuring the sacred brew would never be lost. Weathered hands crumble baked beer bread into the massive clay vat. The bapir dissolves, beginning the sacred mash. Water is poured into the dry mash. The mixture settles, and the wild yeast begins its silent, sacred work. Beside the vat rests a clay tablet, the hymn to Ninkasi. The recipe is not just instructions, it is a prayer. Baked into the clay forever, the hymn ensured the sacred brew would survive. The first recipe was a prayer to the gods.
2,500 years before the Common Era, Giza, the workers' village, where beer was not just a drink, but currency.
The workers who built the pyramids were paid in beer. 4 liters per day, every day, standardized and measured.
Thick, nutritious beer was poured into smaller cups. It was not just payment, it was the fuel that built the pyramids.
Beer was the physical embodiment of imperial power. It was the wages of civilization, the fuel that built the eternal pyramids.
Weathered hands lift a rough clay cup. The beer is thick, cloudy, and heavy with nutritious grain sediment. It was not just a drink. It was liquid bread, providing the calories and hydration needed for brutal labor. Every worker drank 4 liters a day. This thick, nutritious ration fueled the muscles that moved the stone. Without this simple, fermented grain, the Great Pyramid would never have been built. Beer is the foundation of civilization. 100 AD, the edge of the Roman Empire. Here, the civilized world of wine meets the dark beer of the north. The Romans drank wine. But the legions stationed on the cold northern borders discovered a different, stronger drink. Tacitus wrote of the barbarians drinking a foul liquid made from grain. The soldiers soon adopted it as their own. Rome conquered the world with wine, but the borders were held by men who learned to drink beer. Weathered hands mix sprouted grain with water in a rough clay bowl. The mash begins its slow transformation into beer.
Water is poured into the dry mash. The mixture settles, and the wild yeast begins its silent work. The beer is dark, cloudy, and heavy with grain. It is not the clear drink of today, but liquid bread. This dark, nutritious beer kept the legions alive through the brutal northern winters. Beer was survival itself. 1300 AD, inside the deep cellars of a Trappist monastery, beer was no longer just a drink, it was a sacred craft.
The massive clay vats of antiquity were gone. In their place, massive copper kettles and charred oak barrels began to shape the taste of beer. The monks noticed the wood and copper changed the beer. It gave it color, structure, and a flavor that could survive the long winters. They mapped every recipe, taste by taste. They called it the Divine Brew, the invisible spirit of the monastery preserved in liquid form. Weathered hands in rough wool sleeves stir the dark, steaming mash. The monks control the temperature with absolute, silent precision. The hot liquid is poured into charred oak barrels. The wild yeast enters the dark wood, beginning the long fermentation.
A wooden spigot releases the dark, amber ale. It is thick, complex, and alive with the spirit of the monastery. They called it the Divine Brew. The monastery was the first true craft brewery, preserving the recipe through centuries of silence. The year 2026, a return to clay vessels, wild yeasts, and zero intervention. The circle finally closes. Cloudy, unfiltered, and alive. The wild yeasts return, bringing back the complex flavors that industry tried to erase. A weathered hand pours from a clay jug into a modern glass. The ancient ritual is reborn in the present. 11,000 years later, it is still just grain, yeast, and water. The same fermentation, the same ritual. 6 epochs, the same 3 ingredients, grain, yeast, and water. What began in the cave still lives in your glass. The beer you drink today carries the memory of every hand that shaped it. The nomad, the scribe, the worker, the monk, the machine, you. It is the oldest continuous ritual in human history. Grain, yeast, and water.
Grain, yeast, water. 11,000 years. The same fermentation, the same ritual, the same living beer.